The first time I touched the mirror, it was warm, too warm. The kind of heat that doesn't come from plumbing, but from breath. Someone had just been in that room, room 3B Friedrichstraße, boarded up since '77. I shouldn't have returned, but I still had the key. And something in me needed to know. Behind the glass, I found a photo of myself, taken from an angle no one could have had. That's when I realized I'd been watched long before I knew I was a spy. What came next wasn't protocol. It wasn't patriotism. It was survival and guilt that still sticks to my lungs like the smoke I lit that night. If you've ever destroyed something just to sleep again, you'll understand why I had to burn Berlin behind me before I lose my nerve. Hit like, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. This one won't be easy. I wiped the frost off the doorknob with my sleeve. Friedrichstraße was silent, too silent for a city like Berlin. The key still fit. Same rust in the lock, same resistance. As if the door resented me for coming back. 6 years. Sealed, maybe more, and yet everything smelled exactly the same. Damp wood, old cigarettes, and something sharp underneath. Memory, maybe. I stepped inside and locked it behind me. Not that it mattered. Whoever needed to get in wouldn't need a key. The apartment was untouched. No dust, though. That's what hit me first. No dust, no cobwebs on the books, no film on the windows. Either the ghosts had been cleaning, or someone had been here. Recently, I didn't turn the lights on, just walked to the bedroom. The mirror was still there. Walnut frame, anchored into the wall like it was part of the structure. I stared into it, and for a moment, it didn't reflect me. Not properly. Like there was a delay. I hadn't come to reminisce. I came because I couldn't sleep. Not for weeks. My contact from Budapest, Lajos, had said something before he disappeared in '79. Something about the mirror. Don't look too long. It shows what you leave behind. I thought he was drunk. I thought he meant guilt, regret, whatever. But Lajos never said things for effect. He said things to stay alive. That night, I found myself sitting on the bed, facing the mirror across the room. I left the door open behind me. Not out of carelessness. I wanted to hear if it moved. I lit a cigarette and watched my own smoke drift across the reflection. That's when I noticed it. A shift in the background. Subtle. Like someone behind me had moved. But when I turned, nothing. Just the empty hallway. But in the mirror, the hallway was darker than it should have been. Like it was remembering. Something that wasn't there anymore. The walnut frame wasn't original. I remembered that. It had been added in '77. I was the one who recommended the carpenter. But why bolt a mirror to a concrete wall in East Berlin unless you were hiding something? I moved closer, ran my fingers along the edge. No visible screws, just wood and time. But at the top right corner, there was a faint ridge, barely visible. In daylight, I took out my pocket knife, scraped. Flakes of old varnish peeled away. Underneath, a mark, a triangle. Burned into the wood, not drawn. That wasn't furniture work. That was operational. A marker. That's when the adrenaline kicked in. Not like during gunfire. This was colder. The kind that grips your chest and whispers, "You're not alone." I reached into my coat and pulled out the small screwdriver I always carried. 3 minutes later, I had 2 screws loosened. I didn't remove it. Not yet. I just needed to be sure. The air behind it was different. Still, thick. That's when. I knew I'd be back the next night. And I wouldn't come alone. I slept at a cheap hostel near Cottbusser Tor. The kind where nobody asks for ID. I didn't dream, but I woke up twice, drenched. Every window in the room was fogged from the inside. I left at dawn and walked through the city like I didn't exist. Nobody looked twice. Berlin is good at pretending. That day, I did something stupid. I sent a message to Langley. Not a full report, just a pulse, coordinates, phrase code. I told them I was checking shadows in the glass. It was enough. They'd know where I was. At nightfall, I returned. The hallway smelled like wet concrete. Someone had recently opened it. Vents. I didn't knock, didn't hesitate. I went straight to the mirror. This time, I was ready to unscrew it all. But as I lifted it slightly, something scratched the wall. Not behind it. Inside it, hollow. That mirror wasn't glass. It was a box. And something inside it had just shifted. I didn't sleep the second night. Just watched the mirror like it might speak. I had it unbolted now, leaning against the desk with the backside exposed. The layer behind the glass wasn't insulation. It was lined with something darker, thin wood panels, hollowed in the center, hand-cut. Inside, resting almost like an afterthought, was a small envelope sealed in wax. No markings, no stamp, just the same triangle burned into its surface. I didn't open it right away. I couldn't. My hands weren't steady, and not because I was scared. It was something older than fear. Lyoz's voice echoed in my head, his last sentence before vanishing in 79. Behind the mirror, you'll find the reason. I thought he meant paranoia. Maybe guilt. Maybe me. But this was literal and deliberate. Inside the envelope was nothing but a photograph, folded once, carefully. It showed me, standing on a rooftop in Budapest, winter coat, gloves, and a man. Next to me, I had no memory of, but we were both smiling. Like friends. Like co-conspirators. I wasn't smiling now. Lit a cigarette and stared at that image until the ash bent. I didn't return for nostalgia. I returned because I needed to know if what he said was madness ... or prophecy ... the memory of that moment. In 79, Lyo's drunk, bleeding slightly from his nose, pushing the words out like they were knives. It hadn't left me. It watched you before you knew you existed, he whispered. You were already chosen. We just played along. Back then, I told myself he'd cracked. Too many years in the gray. Too many friends turned ghosts. But now I wasn't sure. That photo wasn't taken by accident. And the mirror wasn't put there for decoration. I looked over my shoulder more than once that day. The paranoia wasn't useful. It was survival instinct stretching its legs. I noticed a man in a green coat following me from Friedrichstraße to Alexanderplatz. Not close, not obvious, but always there when I stopped. Always one bus behind. I led him through a loop across Kreuzberg and slipped into a bookstore. When I came back out, he was gone. Or maybe I had never seen him in the first place. That's the danger with this kind of work. Eventually, your shadows don't need bodies. That night, I pressed the photograph under the desk lamp and studied it again. Budapest, no doubt. The Danube in the background, partially frozen. But what bothered me wasn't the setting, it was the angle. The camera would have had to be floating in air or mounted on a building that didn't exist until N 1981, which meant that photo shouldn't exist. I grabbed my old field notebook, the one I hadn't opened in years. Inside, scribbled in shaky cursive, were the last words Lyos gave me before disappearing. If you see yourself from outside, you're already inside. I didn't understand them then, now. I wasn't sure I wanted to. I stayed awake smoking by the window until sunrise. There was a crack in the frost, right at the edge of the pane, like someone had breathed on it from the other side. I checked. The latch. It hadn't been forced. But the glass itself was cold, except for a single fingerprint just below eye level. Not mine. I'd wiped the window clean hours ago. I touched it. Fresh. Oily. I didn't move for a full minute. Then I grabbed the envelope, resealed it as best I could, and slid it under the floorboards in the bedroom corner, an old hiding spot from when this place was safe. I didn't trust myself to keep it on me, because if someone wanted that photograph, they'd come back, and if they did, they'd find an empty mirror and a man too tired to keep running. The third night, the apartment felt heavier, not colder heavier, like the air had learned how to press down on my chest. I moved slower, as if someone was watching me through the walls, timing my steps. I had no new leads, just the photo hidden under the floorboards and a name echoing in my head like an old song. Laios. I wiped the mirror again, not out of habit, out of ritual. That's when I saw it, a smudge. Top left corner of the glass. Too small to notice unless you were looking for it. A fingerprint, or the curve of one. I pressed my own finger next to it, didn't match. I tried cleaning it. It stayed. The kind of mark that doesn't come from touch, but from pressure someone. Leaning in, watching the reflection shimmered briefly under the lamp's glow, like breath had been caught between two panes of time. I stepped back. There was no doubt now. Someone had been in the room. That night, I turned the mirror around again, slid my fingers along the inner frame, careful this time. And there it was, something I hadn't noticed. A line, faint and shallow, etched into the backside wood with the precision of someone who had time to wait. I fetched my magnifier from the coat. Pocket dot, it was a coordinate. One single line, 473032.2N, 1935.8. Nothing else. No date, no name, no indication of what it pointed to. Just a location. Or maybe a message. Budapest. I recognized it immediately. Near the old radio facility outside Cabana, the same sector where I was stationed in '76. I sat on the floor, the frame leaning against my knees, and tried to remember if I'd ever been to that exact coordinate. I couldn't, that time in. Budapest is a blur of smoke, static, and orders scribbled on napkins. But something about it scratched at the back of my skull, like a match looking for flame. It didn't make sense, unless it wasn't meant to. I left the mirror as it was and took out my old code book. Not for encryption, for memories. I kept things there no one was supposed to record. People who vanished, places that never made it to reports, things said over coffee that shouldn't have been remembered. I flipped to 76. Most of it was redacted, in my own handwriting, but between the ink blocks, one word survived. Gigmond. A man, or maybe a name I made up to justify a lie. I couldn't remember. That scared me more than any fingerprint. I opened the window slightly for air. Berlin stank of wet metal. Somewhere nearby, a tram screamed its arrival. When I closed it, again, the glass fogged just around that same spot where the fingerprint had been. I didn't wipe it this time. I needed it there. Like a compass pointing to something I couldn't yet admit. I couldn't trust the consulate, not with this. And certainly not with whatever waited in Budapest. I didn't even know what game I was in anymore. Only that I wasn't the one holding the board. I poured a finger of vodka into a chipped glass and sat beside the mirror. Let the silence breathe. Then I took a pencil and etched the coordinate into my wristwatch strap inside, under the leather. Quiet, permanent, private. If someone else knew that location, they'd follow it too. But I'd get there first, and I wouldn't come back the same. I stared at the mirror for an hour before I touched it. I had done the math, checked the frame, measured the wall. I knew what was supposed to be there. Insulation, concrete, maybe an old pipe. What I didn't expect was weight. When I lifted the glass again, it pulled back like it didn't want to leave the wall. And yet, when I finally got it off, what waited behind it wasn't steel or plaster. It was a void, Not a cavity. A space. Someone had carved out a section. Behind the concrete, maybe 30 centimeters deep, perfectly shaped to house the mirror frame itself. Inside, stuck to the wall with a strip of black tape, was a photograph, curled slightly at the edges, like it had been breathing in there for years. I reached for it, and my fingers hesitated. I didn't want to touch it. I knew, somehow, it would change everything. I took it anyway. I sat on the edge of the bed with the photo in my lap. I unfolded it gently, expecting, I don't know, a face, a document. Maybe LAJOS. But it was me. 1976. Budapest, standing outside the radio facility. And the angle. That's what killed me. It was taken from above, maybe 3 stories up, just behind the main gate. But back in '76, that structure didn't exist. The building that could have offered that view wasn't built until 1981. I remember because I signed off on the site clearance in Langley, which meant this photo couldn't exist, but it did. I flipped it over. Nothing, no date stamp, no code, just the texture of photographic paper and the weight of something that shouldn't be real. I went to the window and checked the alley again. Empty, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was already late to whatever this was. I spread out, the mirror face down, and ran my hands across the wood. The inner frame had fresh scratches. Someone had accessed it recently. Carefully. I had missed them before. They followed a circular motion, like fingers turning something from the inside. I checked for compartments, pressure plates, fiber, seams, nothing. But in the far corner, under a ridge, I found a hairline fracture in the backing. Not a crack, a cut. I pressed it. The whole panel shifted slightly. A mechanism? Or just an old carpenter's trick? Either way, it moved. Inside the hidden space was a second photo. Folded, blank side facing out. I pulled it carefully. My heart climbed into my throat. This one wasn't from '76. It was dated 1963. The bottom right corner held a handwritten word in blue ink. Unmittelbar. German for immediate or direct. It showed the same building, the radio facility. But this time it was night, and the subject wasn't me. It was someone standing in the exact same spot I had in the earlier photo. Same coat, same gloves, same stance. It looked like me, but older, or not me at all. A mimic. I slammed the panel shut and stepped back. A glass mirror caught my reflection. Only this time, it wasn't delayed. It was early. It moved before I did. I knocked the frame off the desk. The crash splintered the silence. The photograph flew under the bed. I didn't retrieve it. I sat on the floor, breathing through my teeth. I didn't believe in ghosts, but I believed in operations, deep ones. The kind that even Langley doesn't document. The kind where time isn't a variable, it's a tool. I wasn't trained for this. None of us were, but someone had watched me long before I stepped into that job, and they were still watching now. I heard it before I saw it. A faint groan, like wood shifting under weight. The kind of sound a man makes when he forgets to hold his breath. I was still crouched on the floor, the mirror shattered, the photograph somewhere beneath the bed. The apartment had gone silent again, not peaceful, but staged, like someone had hit pause on reality, waiting for me to make the next move. Crawled toward the window. I didn't rush. I didn't call out. I didn't turn on a light. I waited. And I saw it. The slightest indentation on the window's edge. The old wood, swollen with damp, had compressed under pressure, as if someone had stood there not long ago, pressing down gently, waiting, but they hadn't broken in. They hadn't even opened it, just waited. Watching. Or maybe leaving something behind. I didn't find any prints that night, but when I turned, I caught my reflection in the mirror shards across the floor, and standing behind me, in that fractured glass, was a silhouette that tall. Still, no features. A shape in an overcoat, spun around. Nothing. The hallway was empty, but something was off in the reflection, the angle. My own face had been clear, but the figure was standing where no one could stand, where the wall should have blocked it. I didn't sleep. I paced, chain smoked through 3 packs, and started reciting protocol lines to myself, just to stay anchored. The 4th time I passed the hallway mirror, I saw it again. Not the full silhouette this time, just the coat. A gray overcoat, swaying slightly, like someone had turned just before I entered the room. By dawn, I had convinced myself it was stress, exhaustion, a neural echo. But then, I walked past the bakery window near a LEXANDERPLATZ. In the reflection. Not the glass, the reflection. I saw the figure again. Same height, same coat. No face. Just stillness. I turned fast enough to knock over a trash bin. The street was empty. And yet, in every window I passed, every puddle on the sidewalk, I saw it again, trailing me. Not walking, waiting. That night, I checked the hidden compartment. Again. The photo was gone, not misplaced. Gone. The mirror shards were untouched, and the bedroom door had remained locked. I had slept with a chair under the handle. No noise, no sign of entry. And yet, the envelope was empty. I didn't panic. I started documenting. I pulled out my old operational journal, the one that never left my person, and began sketching the silhouette from memory. But halfway through the sketch, my pencil snapped. Clean, right at the pressure point where the arm was supposed to be. I sharpened it. Continued. The next line, the outline of the coat, smudged. Not by my hand. By moisture. There was condensation forming at the corner of the page, like someone had breathed onto it. I shut the book and packed it in a sealed pouch. Then I pulled the mattress away from the wall, and behind it, scrawled in thin pencil, where the plaster had begun to peel, was a phrase. I've seen you. Not signed, not stylized, just plain, human. My throat went dry. I hadn't told anyone I was back in Berlin, hadn't logged my return, which meant this wasn't official. It was personal. And someone had been waiting, maybe for 6 years. Maybe longer. I leaned against the wall, eyes closed, trying to remember the first time I had ever seen that gray coat. I couldn't, but I could feel it now, behind me, beside me, somewhere in the mirror that no longer existed, waiting for me to ask the wrong question. I walked to the consulate the next morning like a man returning to his own funeral. The security checkpoint didn't even blink. Either they still remembered me, or someone made sure my name hadn't been erased. I requested access to the lower archive floors, under the pretense of verifying a dormant file. Section B13. That's where we buried ghosts, failed ops, lost agents, projects that never officially started, but somehow went wrong anyway. The air down there was always dry, recycled, smelled like erasers and unspoken questions. The archivist, a bored man with horn-rimmed glasses and nicotine fingers, handed me the box without looking twice. "You're not on the list," he said. I didn't answer. He shrugged and went back to his crossword. I carried the box to the desk in the far corner, set, opened the lid. Inside, file folders, yellowed and cracking. My own reports, typewritten in '76. Surveillance logs, translations, paper memories. Then I noticed the gap. File D4 through D6 gone, removed cleanly. I flipped through the register card. Under D5, a pencil mark. Tiny, almost meaningless. Just 5 words. Locuvist no few on error. few on espejo. My blood stopped. I leaned back, staring at that line. Not a note, not a comment, a statement, left for someone. Maybe for me. I checked the handwriting. Slanted left, confident, European style. Not American. Russian? No. It was Laios. I'd seen his notes before. That same tilt. That same stubborn loop on the letter. Oh, but Laios was gone. Dead, disappeared, or something worse. And yet his hand was here, inside a U.S. consulate file, years after we lost him. I returned the folders carefully and closed the box. The archivist didn't even look up. Outside, the wind hit my face like an interrogation. I walked 3 blocks without direction. My thoughts spun. If that phrase was real, if what I saw wasn't a breach or glitch, but a mirror, then what was being reflected? And for whom? I ducked into a cafe near Nordbahnhof, ordered black coffee, and pulled out the small notepad I carried since '74. I wrote the sentence again. It wasn't a mistake. It was a mirror. I underlined mirror 3 times. In intelligence work, a mirror operation is rare, almost impossible. A setup where you think you're watching them, but in fact, they're watching you, using your own surveillance as bait. But this wasn't that. This wasn't about misdirection. This was about repetition. Reappearance. Reflection. Which meant, if I was seeing these things now, maybe it was because someone wanted me to see them. Maybe I wasn't discovering anything. Maybe I was remembering what had already been shown to me. The photo, the figure, the angle that couldn't exist. I lit a cigarette and watched my reflection in the cafe window. And there it was again, the gray coat, sitting 2 tables behind me. I didn't turn, didn't flinch. I sipped my coffee. And in the reflection, the coat stood. Walked. But as it passed behind me, nothing. No footsteps, no shadow. I turned, slowly. The chair was empty. The street was still. I left the money on the table and walked out without touching the door. I didn't want to leave. Fingerprints. Someone else already had. And they were writing things I'd never filed. In places I'd never been. The city looked different at night. Berlin had always worn its secrets like second skin, but that night it felt naked, exposed under the sickly glow of sodium lamps and the twitch of shadows that moved without wind. I walked east, hands in my coat, collar up. My steps echoed louder than they should have, like someone had turned the volume up on reality. That's when I saw it. 3 flashes, not lightning, not reflections. 3 steady pulses from the Fernsehturm, the TV tower, 1 second apart. Pause. Then again. No one had used that signal since 7/9. It was old code. Emergency meeting. Location embedded in the number of pulses. 3 flashes. Cosmos Cafe. A joke, almost. Cosmos had been shuttered for years. Boarded, graffitied, reclaimed by the silence. But now it pulsed like a vein reopening. I didn't hesitate. I walked. If it was a trap, it was late. I'd already stepped into it days ago. The walk to Cosmos felt longer than I remembered. Every storefront was closed, every window dark. And yet, I felt watched, not by people, but by time. Like I was walking inside a reel of film someone else had already edited. The cafe stood untouched, its sign faded, but still legible. 1 door half-hinged, like it had been opened from the inside and never closed again. I stepped in. The smell hit me first. Dust, mold, something burnt. I expected silence. Instead, I heard tape hiss. A recorder. Still running. On the far table, under a single weak lamp, sat a reel-to-reel player. No operator, just the device. Playing itself. I didn't move closer. I just listened. A voice. Female. Calm. Russian. She said my full name. then my birth date, then something. I had never written down what I did in Budapest in '76, the part that wasn't in the files, the thing I buried even from myself. I closed my eyes, she continued. Described the rooftop, the gloves, the conversation I had with a man whose name I still don't remember. Then the tape stopped. Didn't touch it. I lit a cigarette with trembling hands and sat across from the machine. I waited. The reel didn't rewind. The machine didn't spark. But under the table, taped to the underside, I found a folded napkin. No writing, just a small smear of lipstick. Same color a woman once wore in Budapest. A woman I wasn't supposed to remember. I left the napkin there. When I stood to go, I noticed a chair by the window, slightly pulled out, warm to the touch. Someone had been sitting there moments before I arrived. I didn't search. I didn't run. I stepped outside and the street swallowed. The sound of my breath. That's when I noticed the tram across the way. Inside, someone sat alone. Gray coat. No face. But this time, I didn't blink. The tram rolled forward without a driver. No lights. No passengers. Just the figure. Still. Watching. I stepped backward, heart hammering. And in the flicker of the tram windows, I saw something tucked under the cafe awning, a slip of paper. I pulled it loose. One line: confessions don't erase consequences. No signature. Just the sting. I didn't go home. I didn't go anywhere familiar. I walked until my feet blistered. Then I sat under a bridge and smoked every cigarette. I had left. Someone had triggered the signal. Someone had recorded the tape. And someone knew what I did in '76. The part I still don't say out loud. Even now. I returned the next night. Couldn't help it. Some places stay under your skin, like scars you keep scratching. Cosmos looked darker now, like it had sunk into the sidewalk an inch deeper. The door was gone entirely this time. No hinges, no wood, just a yawning entrance, framed by cracked tile and silence. I stepped through. No smell, no dust, like someone had wiped the whole room clean, except for the sound. That same reel to reel. Running again. The table was bare. No cigarette butts, no ash. Just the recorder, humming. Softly. A red light blinked, recording, not playback. This wasn't a message. It was live. I sat slowly, unsure if I was being watched or used. A voice came after 10 seconds. Same woman. Same calm. She spoke in Russian first, then switched to English. She said my name again. Then you knew it wasn't Laios. I froze. Because she was right. The man in Budapest, the one who handed me the microfilm, he'd looked like Laios, moved like him. But he never called me by my real Cody name. Never lit his cigarettes the same way. I buried that doubt under years of silence, but someone else had dug it up. The voice kept going. She listed operations by code. Some real, some false. Some I'd never heard spoken aloud. Then came the drop. The Budapest file was falsified by the Americans. You were never supposed to return. Static hit like a slap. Then the reel clicked off. No rewind. No mechanical buzz. Just silence. I stood, reached for the machine, and found a Polaroid underneath it. Not from the past, from that night. Me. Sitting at the table. My hand half raised. Eyes caught mid-blink. I dropped it instantly. Looked around. Nobody. The cafe didn't even have windows anymore. Just black space where the outside should have been. I stepped back. The recorder popped. The red light blinked twice. I turned to leave, and there it was, on the floor by the doorframe. A notebook, leather-bound, unlabeled. I picked it up with hesitation, flipped to the first page. My name, full name, blue ink. Same handwriting. as my own. I kept turning nothing blank pages until the end last page. 5 words. Eres uno de ella Zahora. Spanish. I hadn't spoken it in years, but it cut deep, because I knew exactly what it meant. And who used to say it? A contact from 74. Havana. Dead by 77. I hadn't thought of him in decades, but that phrase was his way of saying, you crossed the line. No going back. I clutched the notebook, stepped outside. Berlin was still there. The street, the air, the dull hum of electricity. But IWSN single quotes T. Not fully. That cafe had changed me. Or reminded me. I walked for hours. Unsure if anyone else could see me. Reflections started skipping again. Delayed. Fractured in one window I passed. My coat moved before my arm did in another. I blinked too slowly. By the time I reached my apartment, the notebook felt heavier, and I wasn't sure anymore if I had picked it up or if someone had returned it. I placed the notebook on the kitchen table and stared at it like it might open itself. Still warm, like it had been resting on someone's lap seconds before. I flipped again to the last page, hoping the message had vanished, that I'd imagined it. But no. Eres uno de ella Zahora. The ink had bled slightly, as if written in humidity. I touched the edge. Damp. Recent. I flipped back to the first page. My name. Not just my alias. My full legal name. First, middle, last. No one used the middle. Not even Langley. That was when I felt it. A chill right at the base of my neck. Like something had just slipped behind me, unseen. I turned fast, knocking over the chair. Nothing. Just. The hallway. Still. But when I turned back, a second line had appeared on the page. I hadn't seen it before. Budapest, 1976. You handed it to me? No signature. I didn't write it. I swear I didn't. But it was my handwriting. I slammed the book shut and walked to the sink. Washed my face. Stared at the reflection. It was me, sure. But I looked like someone trying to remember a dream that hadn't finished. The sink dripped once. Twice. Then I noticed something else. A small envelope inside my coat. I hadn't put it there. Same wax seal as the one behind the mirror. Same triangle. Opened it without thinking. Inside was a torn page from an operations manual, typed in Cyrillic. English translation scribbled underneath in green pen. My color. My scrawl. But I didn't remember writing it. Held it under the kitchen light and read aloud. Phase 3 initiates when the subject recognizes himself in the opposite role. Dropped the paper. I had seen that sentence before, years ago, in a training brief about double agents suffering identity fractures after prolonged immersion. But this wasn't theory anymore. This was now. I needed answers. I needed names. I reached for the red phone in the cabinet, the one that routed through Langley. No trace. Before I dialed, I checked the lock. The front door was open. Not ajar. Wide. And in the hallway, sitting neatly against the wall, was a package. Brown paper. No label. I stepped forward, lifted it. Inside, only one thing. A cassette. Unlabeled. I still had a player. Dusty, but functional. I inserted the tape, pressed play. The first 10 seconds were just static. Then my voice, not a copy. Not a simulation. My voice. Reading names. Dates. Procedures. Then I heard it. We agreed. He won't remember unless we trigger the object. My breath caught. Another voice answered. Faint. Russian, female. Then show him the notebook. Click. End of tape. I ripped it from the player and threw it across the room. It didn't shatter. It bounced once and landed upright, like it had done this before. I grabbed the notebook and stared at the front cover. The leather was warm again, pulsing. Almost. And then it hit me. The sentence on the last page. Ers ano di elo Zahora. Not a warning, a confirmation. I wasn't being recruited. I'd already been activated. Maybe. Years ago, maybe that night in Budapest, and everything since Berlin. The mirror, the tape, had just been the final pull on a string I didn't know. Was mine. I sat down, lit a cigarette, opened the notebook again. Now. Every page was filled. My handwriting, my codes. My memories. Except, I didn't remember writing any of it. But the part that scared me most? It sounded exactly like me. I hadn't seen him in nearly a decade. The man who taught me how to disappear, how to lie without blinking, how to bury truth under routine. He used to go by Keller, probably not his real name. We trained together. In Virginia, long nights, stale coffee, drills until your mind blurred into protocol. So when I saw him on the U-Bahn platform at Nolander Flats, coat zipped, gloves folded in one hand, I knew it wasn't coincidence. He didn't wave, didn't smile, just looked at me. And slowly shook his head. Disappointment, warning, maybe both. Then he dropped something, a small white card, let it flutter onto the tiles, and turned away without a word. I waited until the train doors closed behind him before I moved. Picked up the card. It wasn't blank. On one side, my codename, retired since. 77. On the other, a phrase written in block letters. Some things can't be looked at without breaking. I stood there as the wind from the departing train whipped through the tunnel. Cold, dry, unforgiving. He hadn't made contact to recruit me. He'd come to say goodbye. Or maybe, to disavow me. I folded the card, slipped it into the lining of my coat, and walked out. I felt watched the entire way back. Not followed. Just watched. From windows, from reflections, from the parts of Berlin that refused to forget. I reached the apartment and poured myself vodka without taking off my gloves. My hands shook. I hadn't seen Keller since he disappeared from Langley in late '74. Back then, the rumors were that he'd defected. Others said he'd seen something he wasn't supposed to, but no one ever filed it. Now I knew why. He hadn't disappeared. He'd been removed. Quietly. Strategically. And now he was back. Just long enough to deliver that one final sentence. I opened the notebook again. The pages were shifting. New entries. Fresh ink. A sketch. It was Keller. Drawn in profile. Underneath, a note. He remembered. In my handwriting, but I hadn't written it. Dropped the book on the floor. Turned to the window. Berlin's skyline blinked. Back, 3 lights again. From this FERNSEHTURM. But not a signal this time. Just a pulse. Steady. Rhythmic. Like breath. I paced the apartment, retracing my steps from earlier days. Every object, every mark, felt loaded now. As if the whole place had been designed to contain something I was only now beginning to see. Under the radiator, I found a box. Small. Wrapped in brown paper. The same wax seal. Triangle. I opened it. Inside, a slide viewer. Old. Soviet. Functional. And one slide. I inserted it. Held it to the light. The image flickered to life. A room. Dark. Mirror at the center. One man standing in front of it. Staring into his own reflection. And behind him, Keller. Watching. His eyes wide. Not fearful. Not angry. Just broken. I didn't know who took the photo, but I knew what it meant. He'd seen it too, whatever was, and it had cracked something inside him, just like it was doing to me. I dropped the viewer on the bed and sat down hard, lit a cigarette, watched the smoke curl against the ceiling. We used to think knowledge was power, but Keller knew better. He knew there are truths that don't make you stronger. They hollow you out. I still don't know why he showed up that night, But I know what he left me. Permission. To stop looking. Or maybe a dare. To keep going. I returned to the apartment without coat, without gloves, without a plan. Just a bottle of vodka, a box of matches, and the photograph I had tried to forget. Praga, 76. The one taken from the angle no one could have had. My face looked calm in it, detached, like someone who hadn't yet realized he was already being used. I set the photo on the desk, poured myself 2 fingers, didn't drink it, walked the perimeter of the room one last time. Not for nostalgia, for confirmation. I needed to be sure nothing remained. Not of me, not of them. The air was still charged, the mirror gone. The hidden panel open, empty like a mouth that had finished speaking. The apartment no longer felt like a place. It felt like residue. I opened the windows to let in the cold, lit the first match, watched it die, and lit another. This time, I dropped it into the drawer filled with old reports, code sheets, blank cassettes. The flame caught fast. Hungry. I added. The photo last. Held it by the edge, watching the image blur into smoke before releasing it into the fire. I didn't look away, not even when the edges, curled like skin. Smoke filled the room fast. My eyes watered, but I didn't flinch. I sat by the open window, letting the freezing air mix with the rising heat. The burn was clean. No alarms, no sirens. Like Berlin itself had agreed it was time to forget. I thought about Keller. About the notebook that wrote itself, about the voice that knew too much. Maybe this was their plan all along, not to erase me, but to make me erase myself. To watch. One last test of obedience. Could have walked away. I could have archived the truth somewhere, left it for someone else, but I didn't, because it wouldn't have ended. They would have kept coming, in reflections, in slips of paper, in voices behind glass. So I did the only thing I could. I erased the stage. The flames climbed the curtains, reached the ceiling. I stood, bottle in one hand, matches in the other. I whispered a name. Not mine. There's the one they made me use in Budapest. Then I turned, stepped through the smoke, and left without closing the door. The hallway was empty. Outside, Berlin looked the same. Gray, impatient, forgetting itself one stone at a time. Didn't look back. Not at the door. Not at the street. Not at the smoke beginning to lick the sky like a secret, finally confessing itself. At the corner. I dropped the matchbox in a trash bin, kept walking, didn't stop until I reached the canal. I sat on the edge, finished the vodka, listened to the water lap at the stones, felt the chill reach my bones, then passed through. A man passed behind me, didn't speak, just dropped something on the bench. I waited until he left. It was a mirror. Pocket sized. Cracked. I picked it up. Stared. It didn't reflect me, just the fire in the distance, burning like a confession. I didn't sign. I live by a lake now. I won't say where. Not because I'm hiding. I've forgotten how. It's more that names don't work here. Places like this have no memory. The water doesn't ask questions. The trees don't stare back. No reflections. That's the point. Built the cabin with my own hands. One room, no phone, no glass. Every mirror was ripped out before I moved in. I use polished steel to shave, blurred just enough to keep my face unfamiliar. I don't get visitors. Except once, a boy came, lost in the woods, said he was looking for his dog. I gave him a coat and cocoa. He saw the map above my bed, red marks over places like Budapest, Berlin, Prague. He asked if I'd been there. I said no, but my hand twitched when I did. He left the next day, but something stayed. The next morning, I found the notebook again. Same leather, same weight. I burned it, watched the pages curl in flame. Yet there, It was on my nightstand. Open. To a new page. One sentence. You didn't burn the right one. No signature. No date. I didn't open it further. I wrapped it in cloth and locked it in a tin box, buried behind the shed. 2 nights later, it was back on the nightstand. I stopped burying things after that. Now I just leave them where they fall. Sit by the lake most mornings, smoke rising into the mist, coffee black as memory. And sometimes, across the still water, I see it. Not a man, not even a figure, just the coat, gray, collar turned. No face. Always at the edge of the tree line, watching. I blink, and it's gone. But the ripple stays, like someone stepped into the water and left behind a question. The kind no file can answer. The photograph, the one from Prague, still exists. I know it does. I only burned one. I dream of it sometimes, drifting in someone else's drawer, waiting to be found by someone who doesn't know better. And when that happens, when they come looking, I won't lie. Not anymore. I'll tell them everything. Every word, exactly as it happened. But I'll leave out one thing. The reflection. What I saw behind that glass. Because some images don't fade. They follow. And mine is still walking somewhere in Berlin, wearing my coat, waiting to be remembered. The cabin's quiet tonight. No wind, no birds. Just the soft creak of wood adjusting to the cold. I sit by the window, candle flickering low, the mirror, that cracked, pocket-sized thing, resting on the table. I haven't touched it in weeks, but I still feel it watching. The last entry in the notebook hasn't changed. Still blank. Just one small, oily fingerprint at the top right corner. Not mine. I told myself this was exile, but maybe it was permission. Maybe they let me live, so I'd keep carrying this, whatever this is, far enough from them that it couldn't find its way back. Sometimes I wonder if I ever really left Berlin, or if I've just been walking through its reflections ever since. The fire's dying now. And for the first time in years, I think I see movement in the glass. If you knew something wasn't meant to be seen, would you still look? Subscribe, and tell me in the comments if you ever heard of this story before.